Hello Animorphs fans and welcome back to the Animorphs universe. We're doing AniLysis number 94 today and we're looking at Guide. Who's Guide? He was a one-off character, sorry for the fluffer in the way, from this book, book number 26, The Attack. He only ever appeared in this book, but he's quite a prominent character in that one. So let's find out all about him, shall we? It's largely plot-based because there's not much given to his personality, but I think that's just part of the Escort thing. Did I fail to mention? This is an Escort character, the first single Escort character we've covered so far. Escort are these weird hybrid creatures of Isk and Yort. The Yort being very similar to Yerks from the past, quite distantly removed. And they've learned to become symbiotes with the Isk. I've done a previous AniLysis on the Escort, which you can check out later. I probably will do an updated version of that AniLysis sometime in the future, but for now, that should suffice. But yeah, its Guide is an Escort, and the Animorphs come to the City of Beauty to fight off the Howlers. So it's a big game between the Elemist and Cryak. 7 warriors from Cryak's side versus 7 of the Elemist's chosen warriors to fight for the future of the Escort. And the Animorphs eventually agree to this. They get transported to the City of Beauty, but they don't know this world, they don't know what's going on, and this is where we're introduced to Guide. Disclaimer, when I do the quote reading, I'm going to do the Escort voice in the style of MacLeod Andrews, who does the audiobooks for Jake's narrations. And I really am fascinated by how he voices the Escort, so I'm going to do my own version of his Escort voice. So don't just think, he's copying how MacLeod Andrews does it. No, I'm deliberately copying how he does it because I like it, and I like to think that that's sort of how the Escort speaks. So if you listen to me think, what's he doing with his voice? The first thing you should do is go listen to the audiobooks, okay? That's the rule, okay? Go do it. It's a great book as well, so if it's a good starting point if you want to start listening to the audiobooks, go check out on Audible the audiobook for book 26. Anyway, let's crack on. Let's see how Guide was introduced to the Animorphs. A new assault team of Escort was quick crawling toward us, heads thrust forward, eyes goggling. "Forgive us, strangers," the leader of this crowd said. "We did not expect off-worlders today. Welcome to the City of Beauty. Do you require a guide? Do you wish to sell your memories? Or perhaps any unnecessary body parts?" I was on the verge of suggesting that Rachel morph to grizzly bear and get rid of them. But Cassie said, "You know, if they're serious about a guide..." "Yeah, you're right," I said, but I wasn't enthusiastic. Well, we could use a guide, you know, to show us around, show us where to stay." "And what will you pay?" the Escort demanded, to the sound of eager whining. "Well, we don't have any money," I said. "I will give you an excellent guide, my own grub, in exchange for her hair." He pointed one of his wormy tentacle fingers at Rachel, or more precisely, at her hair. The negotiation was not pretty. The Escort wanted to shave Rachel's head. She explained very calmly that she would remove his head and use it for a soccer ball before that ever happened. In the end, Rachel lost 6 inches of blonde hair. What was left came to just below her ears. In exchange, we got Guide. That was his name, Guide. His full name was Guide, Grub of Skin Seller, brother of Memory Wholesaler. He was a young Escort, which did not make him any less annoying. The first thing he did was try to improve the deal by getting Axe to let him have the last 1.5 feet of his tail. Axe said no. Marco said, "You know what? You jerk us around, Guide, and Axe will give you the last 1.5 feet of his tail." Guide understood the threat. He became easier to deal with after that. He only asked for memories, clothing, hair, and various body parts every hour or so, rather than constantly. A group of escort come to the Animorphs, and the leader of this group, who we can presume is Skin Seller, funnily enough, wants to buy the hair and body parts of the Animorphs, says, my own child will guide you. He is guide, after all. I do have a question about that later on down the line. It does sort of make sense, but we'll get into that in a bit. We're just covering the facts at this point. So this is where Guide comes in. Maybe his father called back into the crowd and said, Grob, come over here. Sort these off-worlders out. And so Guide comes up and he starts trying to wheel and deal, Del Boy style. For you Americans out there, a very famous British character from a show called Only Fools and Horses, who I always sort of picture what Guide being sort of like. You know, EU dares wins, you know, he's always out there for the deal. He comes along, starts trying to sweeten the deal for his own side, even though the deal's already done, which is a bit silly. And Axe basically says, yeah, I'll slice you 1, 2, 3 if you keep doing this. So he quietened down, but he stuck with the Animorphs and did exactly what he needed to do, which was be their guide. And that's his primary purpose throughout this book. So let's quickly look at his personality. We don't really get any indication of what he looks like other than the standard escort. We don't get any separate descriptions of him necessarily. So Ghost of SM has done what I assume is, I mean, he took the quote for it, but did that design. So how accurate that is, I'm not too sure. I'll let you figure that out. Trust you, Ghost. So we do get very little in terms of his individuality, which I think is part of the point with the escort. They don't show much individuality. But what can we glean about his personality? Well, here's evidence number 1. One question, right up front. Have you seen any other off-world strangers? I asked him. Off-worlders, of course. The City of Beauty is temporary home to many off-worlders. Probably drawn here by the charm of the residents, Cassie said dryly. It made me smile. I thought Cassie could like anyone. Evidently, even she had limits. We're looking for members of a species called howlers, Tobias said. Guide's chest whined in a lower key. His mouth gaped open. This species is not known to me. I nodded and looked down at the bright red floor under my feet. Don't lie to us, Guide. Have you ever met an Andalite before? Guide shot a nervous glance at Axe. No. Well, Andalites have the power to mind meld with people. They can look right inside your thoughts and know if they're lying. And if you are lying, they make your head explode. Guide's whine rose and fell. It probably meant something, but I didn't know what. Then, howlers? Did you say howlers? There may be 1 or 2 howlers around. Try 7, I said. Where are they? And do you know why they're here? They came to trade like all who visit our world. They trade memories for boat assaults. Howler memories are very valuable. Guide's first thought was to lie. Why? Who knows? He was talking about, or was asked about, do you know about any howlers? And he says no, and they ask him to clarify with a threat. And he says, okay, they do some trading. Whether that's maybe that's an escort thing to protect the identity of traders. Maybe that's the reason why he lies. Otherwise, maybe Guy just doesn't like to get involved in these sorts of things. Hence, he'd rather just pretend or feign ignorance on this point. It doesn't seem to be a self-serving sort of lying is what I'm trying to get at. Unless you just think he can't be bothered. So that it's sort of self-serving in that way, where it's just like, I can't be bothered to go into detail, so I'm just going to say I don't know. But largely it seems more a case of he'd rather just not say who's been doing what. He's not going to snitch, basically. So whether you take that as a positive or negative trait, you know, it's entirely up to you. But it does go to show that he is willing to lie when asked a direct question from these strangers. make of that what you will. Apart from the next bit, that's all the personality we really get that we can definitely say is something specific to him. So what is the other bit I'm talking about? Well, he is damn dedicated to making money. He is Del Boy. He is all about, how can I make money out of this situation? And here's 3 quotes which show us that, where he's in a very dangerous situation, but he still finds time to try to make a profit out of it. I spotted Guide back against a wall, uncharacteristically quiet. You stick with us after that? I asked him. His eyes glowed. Oh yes, yes, yes. I will be able to sell the memory of that battle for a small fortune, and if each of you would sell me your own unique perspectives, I could buy my own corner with the profits. The Howlers began to fire Dracon beams, not at Eric. They must have known from the collective memory that Chi cannot easily be destroyed by beam weapons. Instead, they were using the Dracon beams to slice around Eric's handholds. We had all morphed. All panicked, but all morphed. Except Axe, who was still partly Andalite, and Guide, who was sitting in a corner now, gazing raptly at the madness, creating valuable memories for later sale. The Howlers' heads snapped around, left, right, their bodies swivelling as they searched for the one who taunted them. They aimed at Guide, who was crawling out through the hole they'd burned. Not me, not me. I'm just an escort trader. And by the way, I'd love to buy your memories of all this. Even in moments of great peril, where he's got these Howlers staring down a barrel at him, and he's crawling away for his life, he's still like, can I interest you in a deal? Oh, Guide, we love you, don't we? But any other personality we can really apply to Guide is entirely speculative, really, and hard to distinguish from just the general way that the escort are as a people. But they don't seem to be as individual as, say, humans. They do show some signs of individuality, but largely that it's based on what their job role is. And what is Guide's job role? Well, it's inherent in his name, because they are named after their job role. His name is Guide. So let's see some examples of him performing his job role, and then perhaps we will discuss the strangeness about how he acts in spite of his name and job role. What's this memory stuff? Cassie asked. You guys keep talking about buying memories. What's that all about? Guide looked surprised, I think. You have never seen a memory show? Then that must be our first stop. It is the greatest of entertainment. One of the first things that Guide actually says to the Animorphs upon being given his new role of guiding them around is to say to them, are you willing to be entertained? Shall we go entertain you? It's in a proper guide or tour guide fashion. But he quickly learns, I think, that they're not there for entertainment purposes. They're there for a much more serious purpose. But the purpose of a guide is not just to take people somewhere. It's also about being knowledgeable about the place that you're in. Because what's the point of a guide if they don't know about where they are? They don't know about the things they're guiding you through. So he does show a lot of examples of good working knowledge of how, at least this part of the City of Beauty, operates. And not only that, but how stuff like the memory things operate. Guide? Yes? When you view memories, I mean in the normal way, not like Eric did for us, turning into a hologram, how is it done? Guide emitted a low diaphragm whine and said, there is a small device that attaches to the head. It ties in directly to brainwaves and plays the memories as if you yourself were recalling them. And these memory headsets work on all species? We are visited by many species, Guide said. The headsets have always worked, although not all species choose to indulge. Not only is he knowledgeable about the technology in the City of Beauty, But he's very good at finding appropriate locations, and 3 times during the course of this book, he has to find the Animorphs' temporary emergency accommodation. And he does it pretty well each time. Not that he does it flawlessly, but then again, is there a place on the City of Beauty where the Howlers can't eventually find and get in? Probably not. So I think with that in mind, you'd still say Guide does a pretty good job of being able to take the Animorphs places where they can stay. Cassie looked a little hurt, but in a very calm voice she said, "It just seemed to me that if we have to have a battle, we'd be better off if we knew where we were and what was going on." She was right, of course, but the edginess I felt wouldn't let me admit it. We need a place, a base of operations. We can't just stand out here in the open. "Then come, follow me," Guide said. "I know the right place." Before we move on to just talking about the plot, because now we've covered his job role and his personality, which, let's face it, there's not much else to him, I just want to mention this bit, and it's related to his job role. So his name is Guide, and like every other escort that we meet, their name is tied to their role. But then we get this. "Guide, have you seen these Howler memories?" Cassie asked him. He laughed. "No, not me. I am a trader, a probationary member of the Guild of Traders. I'm not interested in violence and killing and slaughter. No, it is the members of the Criminal Guild and the Warmaker Guild who buy Howler memories." So Guide is a trader. Guide, tour guide basically, is a trader, and he's a member of, or probationary member of the Guild of Traders. Why isn't he in the Guild of Guides if he's a guide? Why is he in the Traders? But it does sort of make sense when, apart from guiding the Animorphs around, he spends most of his time trying to trade with them as well. So this is more to do with the escort in general, I think, but it's something worthwhile to bring up now. Are all escorts traders? But they also have their secondary role, as in Guide is also a guide. Well, his father is skin seller, which is a trade, being a trader, you know, buying and selling. So that doesn't seem to make sense. But why is he constantly talking about trading? Why is he a member of the Traders Union, or what seems like the bloody Traders Union, when he should be the guide person? It's like he's got 2 roles. He should be guide and trader. That should be his name. I think it's partly down to the fact that the Animorphs needed both. They needed somebody who would trade with them, and they needed a guide. So instead of having 2 escort there to do these separate roles, they just combined it into one, which turned out to be guide. Because in the plot, he does a lot of buying and selling with the Animorphs. A lot of it. And he actually becomes the Bill Gates of the escort world because of his trading with the Animorphs. So it doesn't seem to be the role of a guide. So guide is basically guide and trader. I'm not quite sure how it works. I think when we eventually do the updated escort AniLysis, because the original AniLysis video on the escort was one of the really early ones. Before I started doing it like fully in depth, it was more sort of overview. We will get into that in the future, but that's for then. Let's now move on to the plot. So we've covered the stuff outside of the plot. Let's actually get into it now. Chronologically, what happens? Why is Guide important for the Animorphs? "What is this place?" I asked. Rachel shrugged. "Some place Guide got for us. This room and a bathroom. Well, I think it's a bathroom. Hope it's a bathroom." This is when the Animorphs have decided they want to set up base in the City of Beauty, and Guide has taken them to this location with this 1-2 room bit, where Rachel assumes one of the rooms is a bathroom. And it's here where we start talking about the trading of memories, which is a very important plot point for the rest of the book. "I only saw them from the point of view of the victims," Eric said. "I can use my holographic systems to recreate what I saw. But there may be a way to get even more information." "Yes," Guide said, picking up on it right away. "Yes, of course. You could purchase Howler memories." He walked over to the wall and touched a panel. The panel opened. A shelf popped out, an array of buttons and coloured touchpads. I can load memories directly into your Android friend here, but they will be expensive. You're not getting any more of my hair, Rachel warned. Not a kidney or an arm either. Guide whined from the diaphragm in his chest. It may have been a laugh of some kind. I will pay you to view the Howler memories in exchange for harvesting your own memories. This is the start of the trading that the Animorphs do pretty constantly with Guide that allow them to be in a better position to defeat the Howlers. Guide says that he can sell or he can trade the Animorphs' Howler memories, but he'll also be willing to pay for them himself if the Animorphs provide their memories to Guide, which they eventually agree to do. These memories from the Animorphs is what, and among other things, is what makes Guide rich in the end, so he's happily sucking all this up and giving back the Animorphs what they want. Okay then, it's a deal, Guide, but if I understand what you've told me, our memories would make you very, very rich. So this is it. If we live, you get to copy our memories, and you don't ask for anything else, and you advance us whatever we need. I thought Guide was going to fall over. I had the feeling we'd just turned him into the Bill Gates of the Iscord. I will transfer all archived Howler memories to the android. The android has a name. Eric, Rachel snapped. He can call himself the Grand Guildmaster as far as I am concerned, Guide said happily. So Guide at this point becomes very valuable to the Animorphs and to Jake, and this is something I believe is very important for Jake's character, especially as we progress further into the series, because as much as they find Guide a bit annoying, I mean, he's not offensive, but he's just a bit annoying. Jake realises very quickly how important it is to keep Guide around, not only because he finds them places to stay and he's knowledgeable about the world around them, but just by giving their memories to him, by satiating his need for that sort of thing, they can get all sorts of things in return. Very valuable asset to have on their side. And it actually almost becomes becomes almost like cheating, really. So, for the purpose of this book, Guide effectively becomes the 8th member of this little squad. So it's like 8 against 7 at this point. Maybe we'll get more into that at the end. But either way, they've become very protective of Guide, and after the first ransacking of their place by the Howlers, they want to make sure that Guide is protected and kept with the group. Guide, can you hear me? Yes, of course. I'm not far away. We know, Rachel said. We're just above your head. No, don't look. They'll watch Guide, Tobias said. If we hook up with him in Demorph, they'll have us. The 7 Howlers had emerged from the wrecked apartment. We had lost track of them after that. Eric, I know you can't answer, but if you can hear me, try to find Guide. Hide him from the Howlers. As we watched Guide, another Iscord sidled up next to him. The second Iscord suddenly became a small group of Warmaker Iscord, who simply absorbed Guide. This group of Warmaker Iscord would have been revealed as a hologram if anyone had touched them, but no one did. After a while, the Animorphs decide that they need another place to stay, to rest, because they can't just be hanging out in the open with these groups of Howlers around, so Guide takes them to a new location, which Ghost has kindly done in the background of this image here. It's basically a white pyramid with a big archway out the front. Guide takes them there, but this is also where it's revealed from him to the Animorphs that the Yorts are a distant relative of the Yerks. We are there, Guide announced. We were standing outside a building shaped like a pyramid, maybe 10 stories high in Earth terms. It was white, the gleaming artificial white of plastic, and featured a wide arched door outlined in rows of neon like a rainbow. Something that must have been music was blaring. Yeah, this'll be a good place to hide, Marco said sardonically. No one would ever notice this. Where are we, Guide? We have reached the Temple of the Servant Guild. They will take you in. I have paid for it. They will care for you until I return. What do you mean, return? Rachel snapped. Where are you going? I must feed. You see, we escort are not precisely what we seem at first. The body you see is of our symbiote. We are a symbiotic species. A large outer body, the isk, and the inner self. The much smaller portion called the yort. It becomes clear very soon that the yort are relatives of the Yerks. They come from the same planet and aren't too distantly related, and in fact they fulfill a very similar lifestyle, that being they're parasitic. So the animals are obviously upset by this, but Cassie steps in and allows Guide to tell them about their background. Cassie moved between Guide and Axe. Guide, tell me something. What do you know about the history of your people, going way back to the beginning? Guide looked bewildered, but Cassie was staying between him and the AniLyse tail, so he knew she was his best hope. We escort. I mean, back many generations, the Yort were parasites, as you said. They infested other species, but that was long ago. Since we formed our symbiotes, the combination of Isk and Yort, we have been as we are now. The animals are satisfied with this answer, and in fact it gives them a few little ideas on the side and a few moral quandaries as well, you know, the usual animals stuff. And it was important for Guide to tell them this, because the whole point of this thing was that eventually the Yerks someday might see the Yort and figure out that there's another way to live. And it was necessary for the animals to learn that as well, to see that the Iskort were the Yerks basically finding a new way to live, or a relative of the Yerks. So it was important that it was Guide that gave that to the animals. How necessary that is going forward past this book and going into the future, I do think it is actually a very necessary point. And I've said that word a lot, but it is a very good word for it. It is essential to the plot of Animorphs. This idea of there being another way forward. It's very important for Cassie. Not only Jake, but in fact probably mostly Cassie, because that's where book 50, where she lets Tom go, spoiler alert, and that ties into book 44 as well. But it's about Cassie seeing that sometimes you gotta take a new path and just figure out how to make lemonade out of those particular lemons that you take on board from it. And this, I think, is a vital ingredient to that. But anyway, that's more of an Iskort general thing. It's just that Guide is the vehicle by which we're introduced to this concept, specifically regarding this storyline that becomes necessary further down the Animorphs series. There's that. And I'll stop saying the word necessary now. What to do? The Howls were pumping poison into the building. They had learned fast, too fast. Insect morphs were no longer available. Guide? Windows? Yes, there are windows concealed. I can open them by... Not yet. We go airborne. I told everyone. Stay calm. Morph to bird. Guide, when I say, open the windows. Not before. The Howlers won't come in till they're sure they've spread enough poison. This temple HQ doesn't last very long. The Howlers they've learned, and they're using bug poison now, basically, to flush the Animorphs out. But Guide once again is able to find the Animorphs a new place to stay, the third and final place that the Animorphs stay. And Guide has his way. Being a guide, he probably knows all these places, and he knows all the other guilds and how they operate, which is how he's able to get this latest hideout, which is an abandoned factory. I looked around at our latest home. It was a large open space, maybe 3 stories high, about the size of a basketball court. Crammed into that gloomy cube were an amazing array of machines, some like giant jackhammers, some like steel octopi, others weirdly like merry-go-rounds with elaborate, sharp-edged tools instead of brightly coloured horses. Nothing was working. There was dust everywhere. Abandoned factory? I asked Guide. not abandoned. The Worker Guild refuses to come back to work here until the Superstition and Magic Guild certifies that the place is free of the spirits of fictional characters. It's good to have contacts, isn't that right, Guide? He has his contacts, and he's a little scamp when it comes to that. But this is where the end game comes into play. This is the last HQ for the Animorphs, and it's the place where they set their final trap. But setting that final trap requires a bit more help from Guide on his trader front. And this is where he truly becomes the richest escort. The place we were in was all wrong for the trap. We needed escort around us. We had to make the rules of engagement work for us. I explained it to Guide. He wanted to get paid more. We were running up a big bill, and we might well get killed before we could sell him our valuable memories. Don't worry, I said. That's the next thing we do. Make a complete copy of our memories. I still feel I should be able to harvest an arm at the least. Perhaps some minor internal organs. You want our bodies? I demanded, shocked, despite the fact that I had bigger problems to worry about. If you were doing organ transplants to save lives, yeah, but just so you can stick us in big pickle jars and charge admission to see the human freaks? I don't think so. I have something to sell, Eric said. I will create a schematic of my holographic technology. You can build your own emitters. That was apparently such a bonanza that Guide stopped whining for several seconds. He barely managed to say, "Deal." Marco rolled his eyes. You know, Guide is going to own this whole planet by the time he's done. And then Guide's final major, well no, his second final major involvement here, he is integral to this, is they need to get the Howlers' attention. They need to bring the Howlers into this trap. How do they do it? Well, he's got his list of contacts. We went to an empty store at the end of a long, narrow street. The previous business had moved out, leaving nothing but empty shelves behind. Okay, this will do, I said. Now, how do we get word to the Howlers that we're here? I have only to mention it to a member of the News, Gossip and Speculation Guild, Guide said. So off he trots and he tells somebody in the News, Gossip and Speculation Guild, which is great. I'm looking forward to doing my AniLysis and all these guilds as they come around. But anyway, he does that, and then he comes back to the Animorphs because, once again, he is playing an important role. And now it's a human shield. Or an escort shield, in this case. The door blew back on its hinges. Axe stumbled, bleeding, into the room. The first Howler was 2 seconds behind him. He bounded into the room. Rachel, Marco and Cassie hit him, simply barreling into him. Eric snatched up Guide like the escort was made of feathers. He jumped to the door. Guide clung to Eric's neck, terrified, as Eric filled the doorway. The pursuing Howlers stopped abruptly at the doorway. Altogether they might dislodge Eric, but Eric was holding Guide. The rules of engagement. The Howlers could not kill an escort. The rules of engagement set by the Elemist and Kryak is that they can't harm any escort. Or anybody else who isn't part of this game. It's purely between the 7 and the 7. That's Cornish counting, by the way. And so when Eric basically uses Guide as an escort shield, the Howlers are like, whoa, what do we do? What do we do? And so they have to find another way. They can't barrel the way through, so they have to start cutting around. And though they eventually get around this problem, the whole point was to buy the other Animorphs time to put in place their trap. The other Howlers were solving the Eric and Guide problem. They were burning several new holes in the walls. Guide couldn't be in front of all of them. In seconds, the Howlers would be inside. Now! I yelled in thought-speak. But Marco was unable to respond. He was transfixed, looking at the knife in his stomach. Marco, the memory emitter! Now! He's getting up! It was Axe, bleeding and staggering, who suddenly thrust the small, shiny device into my hand. I gave him a nod, took a deep breath, and slapped the probe onto the Howler's head. All that I remembered of my life was flowing into the Howler's brain, and the lives of Cassie and Rachel and Marco and Axe and Tobias, and even Guide. and the long, long memory of the android who called himself Eric. All that we were emptied into that howler's head, and from there would flow into the endless pool of collective howler memory. So not only all of this, but along with the Animorphs and Eric's memories, Guide's memories as an Iscor also flow into the heads of the Howlers. And of course what happens after this is the Howlers are basically disappeared. Cryek says, I don't want you to have these memories. It is a bit too late, so next time the Howlers attack somewhere, they end up, it's the Shaft Den I believe, they end up doing kiss attacks on them. And they probably tried to buy their hair as well. Obviously Guide's in there as well, so there's probably a bit of that going on in the new Howlers as well. But that is Guide's involvement, and from that point on, the Animorphs disappear, back to face the Ellimist and Cryek before eventually being settled back down on Earth. But that is where we last see Guide, and he probably looks around at the end of it all and think, where the bloody hell did where did everyone go? That really hurts my throat, by the way, when I do his voice. I'm glad I'm pretty much at the end of it now. But either way, we do figure out what happened, sort of, with Guide at the end, and the Ellimist is having a jolly good chortle about it. What did you accomplish? No one knows the future. Not for certain. But it is now more likely than it was before that 300 years from now, the Yeerks will encounter the Iscor. They will realise that they are related, and the Yeerks will see that there is a better way. That's it? Tobias asked. 3 centuries from now? How does that help us? It doesn't, the Ellimist said. But within 6 months, Cryek will send a Howler force to annihilate a race called the Shaft Den. Instead of slaughtering the Shaft Den, the Howlers will try something different. The Ellimist winked. They will attempt to kiss them. Cryek will have lost his shock troops. And the Shaft Den will, well, no one knows the future for certain. Oh, however, you may be sure that Guide is now a very, very rich Iscor. With a laugh of pure pleasure, the Ellimist was gone. The Ellimist takes a lot of joy, seemingly, when it comes to Guide's vast riches that he took from the escapades that went on in book 26, The Attack. And that's the last we hear, that is the end of that book. So now is time really to discuss Guide. Firstly, was this all a Guide Ellimist cooperative throughout? Was it all just the Ellimist and Guide saying, let's get rich, let's do it, let's find a way, a very convoluted way of getting ourselves filthy stinking rich? And it worked. That's probably why at the end of it Ellimist was like, fade away. Maybe he didn't laugh like that, but you know, I like to think. In all seriousness, yeah, so Guide lives probably a very luxurious life after this point, and fair play to him. He's a great character. As much as he's very one line, one joke, I think the simple fact that he is only in the one book really pays off in that regard. I think if, like with the Helmicrons, if we got a second book with Guide, the charm would fade away very, very fast. So the mere fact that he's only in the one book, I think, pays off well for him. But he's quite humorous. He has his good moments. They're not standout, but they're, I'd say, good. And he provides some very useful stuff, both in the literal sense and in the figurative sense. Without him, the Animorphs would have failed this mission. Without doubt, they needed Guide there. Firstly, for his ability to take them places and talk to other guild members and sort things out for the Animorphs. But also, he was able to trade them things that they needed, like Howler memories and such, and yada yada yada. So the Animorphs were able to understand that the Howlers operate with this hive mind, which allowed them to initiate their plans, or Jake's plans at the end there. He's also one that tells the Animorphs that he's basically a Yeerk, slightly different, distant relative, which further down the series, you could argue that it was a necessary, I told you I'd never not say that word again, it was an ingredient in the big cake of what the Animorphs do. Yeah, great Adam, that's very vague. The entire concept of make the best with what you got, that becomes, I'd say, very prevalent at the end of the Animorphs book series. This is one of the first examples I think we see of it, or one of the first major examples we see of it, where, yeah, they're Yeerks, but they found another way. They found a better way. And that is a heavily provided message toward the end of the Animal series, the idea of finding a better way. Even if, on the face of it, it doesn't look great, it could provide a better way. And that is Cassie's character, Jake's character. Those two characters operate massively on that concept. And this is one of the first major times we see it brought up. And that is thanks to Guide. I don't think he's that different to the other Escort, but I think we will cover that when we do the updated Escort AniLysis. Because I really don't think that there's much difference in personality between the Escort on an individual level. There's obviously a bit, but we sort of covered that already. The last thing I really want to get into is Guide a cheat? Is he a cheat code that the Elmist put into this game? Because remember, it was 7 versus 7. So it was the 6 Animorphs against 7 Howlers. So they had somebody else in the fight and they took Eric with them to make up to the number 7. But basically throughout the entirety of them being on the City of Beauty, they had Guide with them, acting as effectively an 8th member of the team. Hence why they were so protective of him. And he did basically everything. He did all the background work. He got them their headquarters, he took them to places, told them where to go, what to do, told them how the memory devices work. He was the human bloody shield that allowed them to fend off the Howlers. He was integral. So how the Elmist has got away with this, how Cryok hasn't turned around and said, oh, contract, you can't do that, you can't do that. Then again, the Elmist, as much as he's supposed to be the god to Cryok's Satan, he's not averse to being a bit cheeky. And, loophole, whoopsie daisy, how'd that get in there? And I think Guide is that loophole. And what a loophole he is. What a great character. Honestly, it helps as well that he's in such a good book. This character could have been very, very annoying. He could have been the Jar Jar Binks of this book. But they held back on that. They didn't jump into massive humour with Guide. His humour was subtle and inherent rather than forced and in your face, which would have completely ruined his character, I think. But yeah, I think he's brilliant. And he is part of the reason that number 26 is one of the better Animorphs books of the series, something that you, the Animorphs fans, agree with if you watched my recent Animorphs ranking based on your votes. It is a very popular book. And so, Guide, big round of applause to you. Fantastic character. Played just enough, gotten rid of at just the right time. Not as in kill, obviously, but, you know, he moved on, became rich, became basically the Elon Musk or the Bill Gates or the Steve Jobs of the Escort world. And we still never found out if he was actually a guide or a trader, or whether he was both or neither. You know, maybe he went on to be a member of the Gossip, News and Speculation Guild. Who knows? He could do whatever at this point. You deserve your riches. You do. You're a top quality chap. And I hope you all agree. Let me know your thoughts as well. Let me know if you think I've missed anything. Whether there's any details you'd like to go into. We can discuss it in the comments. But I'm pretty sure I've covered most things, because there isn't too much to discuss about Guide other than what we've covered so far, I don't think. We don't know where he lives. We don't know what he does outside of being with the Animorphs, apart from obviously feeding in Yeerk pools, but that's just inherent with the race. So yeah, let's figure out what's in AniLysis 95. We're closing in on 100, aren't we? By the way, if you want to see these videos early, become a member of the channel. Support me. I put in a bloody lot of work for you lot. So please consider giving me some coffee money so that I can buy myself some coffee and milk to keep me hydrated during these videos. Thank you for considering if you do. If you don't, then please still continue watching my videos. Anyway, let's find out what's in the next AniLysis. Bye, guide. Hopefully see you soon. So what can we have in Spin the Wheel today? Well, I still haven't managed to get through my audiobook for book 29. I have made a start, but for now we're just going to have books 1 through to 28 and a few of the additional books in here. So you can have anything from the State Governor to Galuit Enilon Escaruth, all the way up to the Vacuum Weapon. Not even I can remember what that is, but we can learn about it, can't we? So let's spin the wheel, everybody. Come on, Fluff. Yay, the wheel! Show some enthusiasm, why don't you? What's it next time? It is Fenestra's Compound. Okay. Book 16. The compound that eventually burned down in the end, and we're going to probably discuss who did it. That's what we're going to do in the next episode, I'm sure. Fenestra's Compound, that's what's coming up in the next AniLysis. So please join me there. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you somewhere else in the AniLyse universe. Cheerio!